Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are jumping headfirst into some pretty wild material. A set of documents that claim there's an entire hidden branch of physics out there, one that operates on rules totally different from anything you'd find in a textbook. So, the material we're digging into today starts with a really provocative question. What if everything we've learned about electromagnetism is just part of the story? Not just incomplete, but maybe even deliberately simplified, hiding something much, much more powerful. The question it really forces us to ask is, could there be a whole other physics that's been developed and maybe even weaponized completely in secret? All right, let's dive into the first part, a secret electromagnetism. So where does a claim this huge even begin? Well, according to these documents, the story starts more than a century ago, with a small change to the work of one of physics' greatest minds. Okay, so the core idea here is that the very language of physics itself was changed. The documents say that the original work by James Clerk Maxwell, the father of electromagnetism, was written in something called quaternions. It's a really complex kind of math. Think of it like a super detailed 3D instruction manual. But later, it was simplified into the vector math that's taught in every textbook today. And the theory is, when they did that, a huge piece of the puzzle got lost, the part that could have unlocked a whole new kind of physics. And who did they say first stumbled onto this lost potential? None other than Nikola Tesla. Of course. The author puts him right at the center of this story, saying he was the one who first rediscovered these hidden principles. This really sets the stage for everything else, framing it as a kind of lost science. Okay, so let's talk about the scalar wave. If Tesla really found this lost science, what exactly is it? Well, it all boils down to this one really radical idea, the scalar wave. The documents call it the building block for this whole new field of physics, which they've dubbed energetics. So what is a scalar wave? Here's where it gets interesting. You know how a normal light wave moves, right? It goes up and down or side to side as it travels forward, kind of like a snake slithering. That's a transverse wave. Well, a scalar wave is supposed to be completely different. It's described as a longitudinal wave. Think more like a sound wave or a pulse you send down a slinky. It's a direct compression, a pressure wave, moving straight through the fabric of space-time itself. No wiggling side to side, just a pure forward pulse. So you might be asking, how in the world could you create and control something like that? The answer, according to these papers, is a process called phase conjugation. Now get this, it's described as creating a time-reversed wave. I love the analogy they use. Imagine you toss a pebble into a still pond and watch the ripples spread out. Now, what if you could create a counter ripple that travels backwards, perfectly collapsing in on itself right back to the exact spot where the pebble hit? That's the idea. It's about concentrating energy back to a single point. And this really lays it all out, the huge difference we're talking about. On one side, you've got your normal electromagnetic waves, the stuff we use every day. They spread out, they get weaker the farther they go, the inverse square law. But on the other side, you have these supposed scalar waves. The claim is they don't lose energy over distance. They're like a laser beam of pure potential that can be focused anywhere. I mean, if that's real, it's not just a small change. It's a complete game changer for physics as we know it. Okay, so this brings us to the next section, healing and destruction. Because according to these documents, this technology is the ultimate double-edged sword. On one hand, it's capable of incredible healing, and on the other, absolute destruction. So let's start with the good news, the utopian promise. The documents tell the story of a French inventor named Antoine Priore. In the 60s and 70s, he supposedly built a machine that used these very principles to cure terminal cancer in lab animals. The idea behind it is just mind-blowing. It's claimed it could literally time reverse a diseased cell, taking it back to its original, healthy state, erasing the disease. And the craziest part? The author claims this wasn't just some fringe experiment. It was backed by hundreds of successful, government-funded tests, right before the whole thing was mysteriously shut down. But then, there's the other side of the coin, the dark side. The documents talk about these terrifying superweapons they call Tesla howitzers, and the list of what they can supposedly do is just staggering. We're talking about destroying missiles in midair, making nuclear warheads useless by changing their very atomic structure, triggering earthquakes on command, creating bizarre cold explosions that suck all the heat out of the air, even taking down an entire nation's power grid. It's the stuff of science fiction. So where does this all lead? Well, it leads to maybe the most explosive claim in the entire document set, that there's been a secret Cold War, an energetics Cold War, fought with these weapons, completely hidden from public view. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The author creates this timeline, and what they do is they take all these historical events that we've all heard of, things that were either mysteries or written off as accidents, and they put them in a totally new light. Remember Khrushchev banging his shoe and boasting about a fantastic weapon? Or that bizarre Soviet woodpecker signal that drove ham radio operators nuts for years? The documents claim these weren't random. They even point to the tragic loss of the Space Shuttle Challenger and a Titan rocket, suggesting they weren't accidents, but attacks in this secret war. So, what about this number, 40-plus years? Well, this refers to the decades-long irradiation of the U.S. Embassy in Moscow with microwaves. Now, that part is a documented historical fact, but the author gives it a unique spin. They argue it wasn't a direct attack to harm people. Instead, it was a test, a 40-year-long intelligence probe. The Soviets, they claim, were trying to see if the U.S. even knew about this kind of physics. By using this tech in a low-level, long-term way, they could gauge the West's reaction, or lack thereof. Which brings us right up to the modern day. And according to this material, the game has changed. It's not about a secret war between superpowers anymore. The real threat now is that these weapons have gotten out, creating a whole new kind of asymmetric threat on the world stage. And here is a claim that is just absolutely startling. The documents allege that when the Soviet Union fell apart, the KGB was desperate for cash, and so they supposedly leased these ultimate weapons to the highest bidder. And who was the bidder? A terrifying alliance of the Yakuza and the Aum Shinrikyo doomsday cult. The price tag? Almost $1 billion in gold bullion. So what does this kind of warfare look like today? Well, the claims are just off the charts. We're talking about full-on weather engineering, triggering droughts and floods, steering hurricanes, tectonic weapons that can cause massive earthquakes, like the 2004 Asian tsunami. They even talk about a new kind of biological warfare, creating shadow diseases to weaken a population. And then there's maybe the scariest one of all, mind control, the direct remote control of a person's actions, with the author citing the mysterious crashes of 2 Air Force pilots as prime examples. So when you put it all together, what these documents are describing isn't just a new piece of tech. It's a completely different version of reality, one that's been operating in the shadows all along. A world with its own secret history, its own hidden science, and its own brutal rules. And the question it leaves you with is a heavy one. It's not just, could this be true? It's, if even a fraction of this is true, who's really writing the rules?